Jakarta mengucapkan selamat Hari Raya Idul Fitri. Mohon maaf lahir dan batin. Dengan keteladanan Nabi Ibrahim alaihissalam dan Nabi Ismail alaihissalam melalui pengorbanan beliau, mari kita tingkatkan keimanan kita, keimanan ketakwaan kita kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Dalam kaitan ini juga perkenan kami juga untuk mengucapkan ikut berduka cita atas wafatnya Kiai Haji Hashim Wahid, adinda dari Kiai Haji Abdurrahman Wahid dan putra dari Kiai Haji Wahid Hashim. Semoga amal dan ibadah beliau diterima oleh Allah Subhanahu wa taala dan beliau kembali dalam keadaan husnul khotimah. Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Association of Southeast Asian Nations atau asosiasi atau perhimpunan bangsa-bangsa Asia Tenggara adalah organisasi negara-negara Asia Tenggara yang berdiri tanggal 8 Agustus 1967 yang lahir di tengah-tengah situasi ketegangan perang dingin antara blok Barat dan blok Timur. Blok Barat dengan AS dan sekutu-sekutunya dan blok Timur dengan Uni Soviet dan sekutu-sekutunya di lain sisi. Dan situasi pada saat itu adalah terjadi perang Vietnam, konflik di berbagai wilayah, terutama adanya perlombaan persenjataan nuklir dan situasi pada saat itu memang di sebagian besar negara Asia Tenggara diancam oleh pemberontakan kelompok-kelompok komunis. Dan tujuan dari ASEAN memang adalah untuk mewujudkan perdamaian, stabilitas, dan kemakmuran di kawasan Asia Tenggara. Pada akhirnya ASEAN juga berhasil menunjukkan sebagai organisasi yang solid, kohesif, dan melahirkan berbagai kesepakatan-kesepakatan yang justru dan juga perkembangan di kawasan regional internasional menunjukkan mereka semakin berperan sehingga negara-negara luar, terutama major power seperti Amerika Serikat, Rusia, Tiongkok, tertarik untuk menjadi mitra dialog, dan ini nanti akan dibahas lebih lanjut. Nah, dalam usianya yang 53 tahun ini berbagai tantangan sudah terjadi, antara lain bagaimana ASEAN dapat mempertahankan kohesiveness dan solidaritasnya, terutama terkait dengan klaim Laut Cina Selatan misalnya oleh Tiongkok, kemudian juga dengan pandemi COVID-19 ini. Dalam kaitan ini saya akan memberikan kesempatan dulu kepada Ambassador Ong Keng Yong. I welcome Ambassador Ong Keng Yong. It is an honor and a great pleasure to have you here, Pak. And also to Pak Philips, selamat datang Pak. Mungkin sebelum before I give the floor to Ambassador Ong, I would like to also to read the brief CV of him. Please. Hold on. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, sebagaimana saya sampaikan terdahulu, Ambassador Ong Keng Yong pernah menjadi Sekretaris Jenderal ASEAN dari Januari 2003 hingga Januari 2008. Sebentar. Oke. Beliau saat ini adalah Executive Deputy Director di S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies pada Nanyang Technological University NTU di Singapura sejak November 2014, dan saat ini masih menjabat sebagai Ambassador at Large pada Kementerian Luar Negeri Singapura. Beliau juga saat ini menjadi duta besar tidak berkedudukan di duta besar luar biasa dan berkuasa penuh Singapura tidak berkedudukan di negara yang diakreditasikan, tapi beliau berkedudukan di Singapura untuk Iran dan Pakistan. Kemudian beliau pernah menjadi duta besar Singapura untuk India dari tahun 1996 hingga 1998 dan duta besar Singapura untuk Malaysia dari 2011 hingga tahun 2014. Baik, Ambassador Ong, I would like to give you now the floor for you to give your presentation. Please, sir.
Thank you, Pak Joki. Can all of you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Pak.
First of all, good morning to everyone in Jakarta and elsewhere. I'm very
Morning,
happy
Pak.
to be able to join you this morning for this seminar on the web. I thank Pak Joki for inviting me, and also ISNU DKJ for having this occasion to share my thinking about some of the issues which you are interested in. So, terima kasih ISNU DKJ and to all our friends in Jakarta.
Terima kasih.
I thought that I would just say a few things in general, and then listen to Pak Philip Beaumont, and then we can have answer and questions, or question and answers from all our participants. Today the subject is on relevance of ASEAN and the role of Indonesia. As Pak Joki say, Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world. Yeah, and I think the population is still growing rapidly. So it is a very important part of the international community, Indonesia. And ASEAN is a big regional organization in Southeast Asia. In fact, it is the only regional organization in Southeast Asia comprising of all the 10 traditional Southeast Asian nations. Of course, we now have Timor-Leste, and the government in Timor-Leste wishes to join ASEAN, and we are now in a process of looking at how we can involve Timor-Leste in ASEAN activities. So, ASEAN was founded, as Pak Joki say, 53 years ago, 1967. And in the past 53 years, ASEAN has been an important part of our life. Yeah, both in terms of politics, in terms of economy, in terms of culture and social interaction. But it is still a small number of people who are involved every day in ASEAN. The challenge for the ASEAN leaders is to expand this knowledge of ASEAN to more people in our countries. Indonesia, you now have 260 million people, yeah, and you have 17 to 18,000 islands. If we can get more Indonesian to know about ASEAN, it will be a very, very big plus for our organization. A very good thing to increase the number of Indonesians who understand ASEAN. And I know that in Indonesia, you have maybe about 30 to 40 ASEAN Study Center at different universities in Indonesia. And you have tried to increase the knowledge about ASEAN and having more students to study about ASEAN. So that is very good news. And I hope that this will continue to increase and ASEAN will be better known to many, many more people in Indonesia. But in all the other 9 ASEAN member states, we must also continue to promote awareness and understanding about ASEAN. And this is what we call work in progress. Today, I want to look at 5 important areas when we talk about ASEAN. Whether ASEAN is relevant, whether ASEAN is still important, and what can Indonesia do in ASEAN to make the organization relevant, make the organization more important. So I will look at 5 main areas. The first thing I want to say is that we must appreciate the location of ASEAN. Location of ASEAN. ASEAN is in Southeast Asia. Yeah. And the geography of Southeast Asia. The geography is between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So we are in the middle. And anything that goes between Japan, China to Europe, Africa, Middle East, or from Europe, Africa, Middle East to China to Japan, must go through Southeast Asia, must pass through ASEAN region. So this is very important because if we are having a different location, or if ASEAN is away from the middle, yeah, we might not be so important to all the countries in the world. But because we are in the middle of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and we are now developing all our economies, ASEAN has a very important role and a very prominent position in world politics and world economy. Inside ASEAN, we have 10 countries. 10 countries, but some of the countries are very small. Brunei is very small. Brunei has only maybe 400,000 people. Singapore, we have 5 million people. Yeah, but Indonesia, 260 million people. Philippines, more than 100 million people. Vietnam, almost 100 million people. Myanmar is what, 70, 80 million people, and so on. So we are talking about a very, very different set of countries and society located in this ASEAN region. But this is important because we have small and big countries in the organization. Everybody outside of ASEAN, outside of our region, will be interested in connecting with ASEAN. Because if they come to connect with ASEAN, they can meet with the small country and the big countries, the small economy and the big economies. So this is one very important thing as we try to promote ASEAN. ASEAN is a grouping of small and big countries. In the middle, maybe we have what we call medium power, yeah, like Indonesia. It is compared to China or compared to America, Indonesia is in the middle. It's what we call medium power. Yeah. So I think this is something that we need to be appreciative of. Now, I want to talk about the powers that I mentioned. Yeah. We have in our ASEAN countries 2 very big countries. One is Indonesia and one is Philippines. Population-wise, as I told you, Indonesia 260 million people. Maybe Pak Choki, the number has already gone up. Yeah, but Philippines more than 100 million people, and both Indonesia and Philippines are what we call archipelagic country. That means to say you have 17 to 18,000 islands. Philippines, they have about 7 to 8,000 islands. So they are important countries with such population, and their economies are also very significant. And you ask me about the role of Indonesia. in ASEAN, as the largest country in ASEAN, largest economy in ASEAN, Indonesia is very important for the development of ASEAN. So some countries now feel that Indonesia is more and more important. And if you talk of big countries, China and India, small country like Singapore and Brunei, yeah, in the middle you have middle powers, middle country, medium-sized country, and Indonesia and Philippines are definitely important. So, if you look at ASEAN, people always ask, what kind of power does ASEAN as a grouping has? ASEAN is not strong like any military power in the West. ASEAN is not an economic power like the European Union. Yeah. In terms of civilization, culture, people look at India, they look at China, they look at the Arab countries, and the young generation think that American civilization has a lot of cultural interests. So ASEAN is culturally a mixed bag. We have many, many different history, different type of religion, different ethnic groups, different cultural traditions. Yeah, but what we don't have is a kind of power that the economy bring for country like United States of America or the United Kingdom or France or Japan. Yeah, the important thing about ASEAN is that we have what we call convening power. We can convene. It means that we can use ASEAN to organize meeting. We can bring all the big and small countries around the world, big and small powers around the world to meet ASEAN member states to talk about how do we conduct better relations, how do we manage the trouble that we have in the world, and how can we organize more and more cooperation across the different regions and across the whole world. So bear in mind, ASEAN may not have the big military power, may not have the strong economic power, but we have the very useful capability, the ability to convene meetings, to bring people together. Big and small countries come together, meet us in ASEAN to talk about the challenges of the world today. So now I want to talk about the agenda of ASEAN. Sorry, there is a disruption with the siren in my neighborhood here. But now I want to talk about the agenda of ASEAN. ASEAN, we have now come together to form a community. We call it the ASEAN community. ASEAN community started officially in 2015, 5 years ago. Under ASEAN community, we have number one, the political security agenda. Number two, we have the economic agenda. And number three, we have the social, cultural agenda. So together we form an ASEAN community. Yeah. So all our member countries of ASEAN now come together to work on all the action plan to implement this idea of a community. The thinking is that if we can work together and operate as a community of 10 different countries, we will have more influence, we will have more leverage, we can have more partnership with other big countries around the world. The second thing about the ASEAN work is about balance. Balance means we want to not only look at the political agenda, we also want to look at the economic agenda, and more importantly, the social cultural agenda. How do we help our different communities in our country, our different population in our country, to develop confidence in themselves, to develop good, healthy lives, to have good jobs, to look after the environment, to help to make sure that we have good education and care for all the young and old people. So the ASEAN community look for this balance. It's not just politics. It is about economic development. It's about social advancement. It's about maintaining our respective culture while understanding what our neighbor has in their own society. So this is a very important vision of our leaders, yeah, having a balance. And balance here also means that when we conduct ASEAN relations with the world, we don't just say we follow the Western countries, or we don't say we just follow the big Asian countries like India or China. We look after ourselves, but we maintain a equal partnership with all these countries, whether in the West or in Asia. So balance is a very important part of our ASEAN philosophy. The last point about ASEAN is that we believe in this concept of a community. As I mentioned, we established this formally, officially in the year 2015. Community means what? Community means we look after each other, we help each other, we work together. So I call this the ABC of ASEAN. ABC of ASEAN development, ABC of ASEAN work. We have our agenda, we have a balance, and then we are committed to having a community. Yes, we are different. Indonesians and Singaporeans, we don't say the same thing, we don't think the same way, we don't eat the same food, but we believe that we are part of a club. Yeah, and as a member of the club, we look after one another. Yeah, we try to learn each other's tradition and culture or language. So, bear this in mind, the relevance of ASEAN today, as Chairman Choki emphasized, we will not be important to other people, we will not be useful to other countries if we do not have a clear vision of our agenda, of our ability to balance our development and relationship with other countries around the world, and most important, if we do not understand how to maintain a systematic way to develop our different community and bringing them together. So the ABC of ASEAN is the agenda, the balance, and the community. And if we do this well, our ASEAN relevance will be very useful and very critical for all the other countries, especially today when the global relationship between the big countries are always full of tension. So we can perform a useful role in helping the big countries, the West and the East, to come together to promote what we call peace and economy. And of course, if we have peace and economic growth, we can give good life to our people. So this is what I thought is important to put across to all of our participants today. Regarding the role of Indonesia, Indonesia, as I say, is the biggest country in ASEAN. It is also the biggest economy in ASEAN. Yeah, and without Indonesia, actually there will be no ASEAN, because in 1967, the leaders of Indonesia agreed that it is a good thing to have an organization called ASEAN. And in fact, the name ASEAN was invented by Adam Malik, your former vice president in Indonesia. Yeah, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It was something that Adam Malik thought that we should use to represent this grouping of Southeast Asian countries. So Indonesia's role has been very significant. Without Indonesia, we would not have established the ASEAN community back in 2003. The beginning of the ASEAN community started at the Bali summit in 2003. President Megawati at that time brought all her colleagues from the other 9 ASEAN countries together and mapped out a plan to have this thing called the ASEAN community. Then from 2003 until 2015, ASEAN countries worked on all the different programs, different preparation, and then in 2015, ASEAN leader officially declared that we are having an ASEAN community. So without Indonesia, we will not have ASEAN community. Going forward, Indonesia will be very important to bring ASEAN to fulfill the kind of role, the kind of work that we want ASEAN to perform. And ASEAN also rely on many things in Indonesia. Yeah. Today, Indonesia is a rapidly expanding economy. Indonesian investment in countries in ASEAN have contributed to a lot of industrialization in countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines. In Singapore, we are a small island. We also receive many Indonesian inputs into our business, into our economy. Yeah. So how do we make sure that this role of Indonesia continue to be welcomed by everybody in ASEAN? I think it goes back to the characteristic of Indonesia. You are the largest Muslim population in the world. You are a multiracial, multi-religious society. No one feels threatened by the size of your Muslim population. No one feels that you are different from the rest of Southeast Asia. You have led by example, and you have contributed to this multicultural character ASEAN. So I hope that in the coming years, Indonesia will continue to do this. Yeah, Indonesian economy today is more than $1 trillion US. More than $1 trillion US. Yeah. So ASEAN economy altogether is about $3 trillion US. So Indonesia is 1/3 the economic power of ASEAN. 1/3. Yeah. 30%, 35%. The power of Indonesian economy contributes to the entire ASEAN economy. So if Indonesia continue to help ASEAN, ASEAN will grow quickly, and ASEAN will grow with great meaning for all of us in Southeast Asia. ASEAN economy, ASEAN GDP is, I said, about 3 trillion. You know, if you look at European Union, they are about 4 trillion. 4 trillion. So we are not very far away. Yeah. And ASEAN trade with the world is also about $3 trillion US. European trade with the world is much bigger. So I think we need to continue to grow. Hello?
Yes, Pak, carry on, Pak, please.
Okay. I made a mistake just now. The GDP of European Union is 18 trillion. ASEAN GDP is about 3 trillion US dollar. So European Union is still very, very big. But ASEAN together, we are 3 trillion US dollar. There's a lot of economic output, and we can have a good influence. So European Union, their GDP is 18 trillion. ASEAN GDP is 3 trillion, giga trillion. But we are still growing, and I think if we continue our ASEAN economic development, we will be able to contribute even more to our position in the international setting. Okay, but Joki, I will stop here, and I just want to reiterate that there is no other organization in Southeast Asia for the 10 countries that we have. If you include Timor-Leste, there are now 11 countries in Southeast Asia. Yeah, there is no other organization. ASEAN is the only one that we have, and we must try to make better use of the ASEAN organization. And if you look at the potential of ASEAN as a group in terms of economic strength, we can grow from 3 trillion US dollar to maybe 5 trillion US dollar. Indonesia, your national agenda is to grow the economy at 6 to 7% per year. This will mean that our ASEAN GDP will also continue to grow beyond 3 trillion US dollar. So we are a sizable part of the global economy. Yeah, and the population of ASEAN will continue to increase. And what is important, if you read all the World Bank reports or the international economic studies, they all think that ASEAN population, especially those under 35 years old, they have all the skills, the IT knowledge, they are very digital savvy. And this is a very important market for the global business people, for the big countries from European Union and from Americas. So we are a very attractive marketplace for all these other countries. You can see the growth of China's trade with ASEAN. This is day to day, we can see more and more China business here in Singapore, in Indonesia, all around ASEAN. This is our high potential. So with the Indonesian participation, the ASEAN role will be even more important. Thank you very much, Pak Choki.
Thank you, Ambassador. Okay, please allow me to briefly make some points of your presentation ini bahasa Indonesia, Pak. So ASEAN terletak secara geografis di Asia Tenggara, di antara Samudra Pasifik dan Samudra Hindia, sangat strategis karena jalur pelayaran dari Asia Timur apabila hendak menuju ke Afrika maupun ke Eropa melalui Asia Tenggara atau ASEAN. Dan pada tahun 2015 ASEAN sudah sepakat untuk mewujudkan suatu komunitas atau masyarakat ASEAN, dan komunitas itu merupakan wujud dari visi ASEAN, negara-negara ASEAN untuk mewujudkan masyarakat politik dan keamanan, masyarakat ekonomi, dan masyarakat sosial budaya secara seimbang. Dan keseimbangan ini sangat penting karena ASEAN juga di sini juga disebutkan berprinsip satu dan lain anggota saling peduli, saling membantu satu sama lain. Istilahnya look after each other, help each other, Kalau dalam istilah yang kalau saya boleh pinjam istilah ASEAN adalah ASEAN, negara-negara ASEAN ingin membentuk caring and sharing community. Itu istilahnya. Dan selama ini negara-negara luar, terutama negara-negara maju, negara-negara besar tertarik untuk berhubungan dengan ASEAN karena potensi ASEAN sebagai kekuatan ekonomi yang cukup besar. ASEAN merupakan pasar ekonomi yang atraktif dan di sini tadi disebutkan bahwa volume perdagangan ASEAN saja nilainya 3 triliun US dollar. Nah, mengenai Indonesia merupakan negara yang terbesar, perekonomian terbesar di ASEAN. Tanpa ASEAN mungkin tidak akan ada, tanpa Indonesia mungkin tidak akan ada ASEAN. Dan dan Indonesia merupakan perekonomian Indonesia merupakan sepertiga kekuatan ekonomi ASEAN. Perekonomian Indonesia menurut Ambassador Ong adalah nilainya volumenya sekitar 3 triliun US dollar. Baik, itu yang dapat saya sampaikan bahwa yang disampaikan oleh Ambassador Ong. Selanjutnya, sebelum Pak Philips kami persilakan untuk memberikan paparannya, kami akan sampaikan secara singkat CV Pak Philips. Oke. Philips Gisario Formante adalah Executive Director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Jakarta. Beliau menamatkan studi S3-nya, meraih gelar doktornya dari Department of Political Science, Northern Illinois University di Amerika Serikat atas beasiswa Fulbright. Research beliau fokusnya pada perbandingan politik, perilaku pemilih, politik pemilihan umum, dan partai-partai politik di Indonesia. Saat ini beliau juga merupakan investigator utama untuk survei pendapat publik yang sedang dilakukan oleh CSIS. Publikasi-publikasi yang diterbitkan, yang beliau tulis adalah terkait dengan jumlah anggota parlemen wanita yang terus meningkat di Indonesia, di Filipina, dan di Timor Leste. Kemudian apa yang terjadi di Indonesia di tahun-tahun awal demokrasi pasca Orde Baru. Kemudian masih ada lagi mengenai institusionalisasi partai-partai politik di pasca era otoriter di Indonesia. Jadi itu yang beliau tulis. Untuk selanjutnya kami persilakan kepada Pak Philips. Pak Philips ini memang namanya seperti nama orang Barat, tapi beliau sesungguhnya adalah putra Minang asli. Jadi jangan terkecoh dengan namanya, Bapak-bapak, Ibu-ibu. Oke, silakan Pak Philips.
Thank you, terima kasih Pak Coki. Pertama-tama, first of all, I'd like to thank NU DKI Jakarta, Ikatan Sarjana NU DKI Jakarta, for inviting me to this discussion. And Pak Ambassador Ong already provided us with the perspective that is coming from his background as a former ASEAN Secretary General of ASEAN. And I'd like to take a different approach to the issue of Indonesia and ASEAN, the role of Indonesia as the largest Muslim population in the organization. And Ambassador Ong also stated that ASEAN leaders now are trying to form ASEAN as a community, socially centered organization. So in this regard, I'd like to, because everything that is related to the issue of strategic interest, regional politics, and so on have been touched upon by Ambassador Ong. I'd like to use the opportunity to provide another point of view, that is how the Indonesian Muslim community have been contributing to the development of society-centered ASEAN. That is kind of a bottom-up, activities that have been done by many Indonesian Muslim organizations, because there have been many critics of ASEAN that said ASEAN is more of a top-down organization. But I think recently, because of the technology, because of the ease of flying from one country to another, now we are also kind of a visa-free among ASEAN countries, so we travel more easier than before. So I might argue that there have been an increased exchange of views, not only coming from government officials, but among ASEAN citizens. So this is, my focus of the focus of my presentation this morning. Also, I wanted to highlight as well that Nahdlatul Ulama also kind of play a very active role in this, recent development in ASEAN. One fact that we need to keep in mind is that 42% of ASEAN citizens are Muslim. So, then it's certainly a large part of the region of Southeast Asia. And most of this 42%, of course, lives in Indonesia. So in one way or another, Indonesia will or should play a very active role in this regard. I think there are, when we are talking about the contribution of the Indonesian Muslims, Indonesian Muslim society to the region, in particular to Muslims across Southeast Asia, there are, I think, 5 types of roles that have been played, and I think will continue to be played by Indonesian Muslims in Southeast Asia. Number 1 is doing social actions. There are, as we know, ASEAN, Southeast Asia is a disaster-prone region. Earthquake, typhoon, and so many other type of disasters are occurring in our region, and many organizations from Indonesia have been contributing in this area. NU has Nahdlatul Ulama has its own disaster relief center. Muhammadiyah also has one, and they've been playing a big and important role in many disaster-prone areas and also in conflict-prone areas. So this is the first type of roles that the Indonesian Muslim organization have been doing in the region. Recently, Muslimat NU, for example, I did this quick research on the, in particular, how Nahdlatul Ulama, various organizations, sub-organization have been playing a very active role. Muslimat NU provided social assistance for COVID-19 in KL and Selangor. I think it was in the beginning. Now, I believe that many of our organization are concentrating more within the country, because the level of this COVID-19 in Indonesia kept increasing. So, and then the second row, I think this Muslim organization in Indonesia also play an important role in creating network of Muslim. For example, there was this what MUI call, or NU also called Muhibah Dais Rumpun in five ASEAN countries. And then a lot of these kind of activities are going on the ground. And then there was also regional training on ASEAN women, peace and security in collaboration with various Muslim organizations, including Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, to strengthen the ability of the society to deal with the conflict. So increasing their capacity to find resolution to conflict. And then because of these networks, it helps in various conflict areas in Southeast Asia. And number three, the type of roles that can be played and is still played by various Muslim organizations in Indonesia is providing advisory on various issues relating to counter-terrorism, for example, and also de-radicalization. In Singapore, I think various Muslim boarding schools benefited from the help provided by Nahdlatul Ulama in terms of religious teaching. Because many of these boarding schools, Islamic schools in Singapore, they have a root of Nahdlatul Ulama tradition, for example. The next type of role is, of course, mediating peace. Indonesia being the largest Muslim countries, and some of the serious conflicts in the region involve, Muslim community in that particular area. For example, in Rakhine State, Indonesia is proposing the 4+1 solution to the problem, but it's not because only in the Rakhine State is the Muslim that are suffering from the conflict, but also people of different religion in that Rakhine State also suffered from the conflicts. So in that 4+1 proposal from Indonesia to provide the solution in Rakhine State, one of the items was that to call for restraint and use of violence, regardless of the ethnic and religion of the party involved. So we know, Indonesia knows for a fact, because we suffered on various ethnic and religious conflicts, when it comes to violence, all walks of life, all ethnic, all religion will suffer. So we are proposing this based on our experience in Indonesia. And the roles of mediating peace, we've been playing our part in finding solution to, for example, the problem in southern Thailand, the Patani problem. And also we've been actively playing a role in as an observer to peace in Moro in southern Philippines. And once again, what we are proposing in these conflict areas, actually trying to find the middle ground, to the conflict. President Abdurrahman Wahid, Gus Dur, for example, once told Nur Missouri, the Muslim leaders of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and then during one of the exchange that President Gus Dur had with him, in trying to find a solution in that conflict areas, Gus Dur said to Nur Miswari, he said, to be a good Muslim doesn't mean you have to establish your own Islamic state. That's what Gus Dur said to Missouri. And that helped, kind of stages for more peaceful approach by both sides in the Philippines, from the MILF and also from the central government of the Philippines. So my point on this type of role in mediating peace is that Indonesia, being a moderate Muslim country, also have been using the same approach, that is to find the middle ground, to find the centrist approach to conflict areas, because we know that from our own experience in Indonesia. Now, the next types of roles that various Muslim organizations have been doing in the region is building infrastructure. And regardless of the size, but we do many of our religious organizations help building infrastructure. For example, there were madrasas established in Cambodia, hospital in Rakhine State. I think our foreign ministry, Ibu Retno, has been very active in this regard, and so on and so forth, to help build better education, in particular in conflict-prone areas where there are sizable Muslim followers. And the next role is maybe with regard to the economy. There are growing market, because when we talk about ASEAN, community-centered ASEAN, then we are talking about civil society, we are talking about citizens, we are talking about consumers. Ambassador Ong mentioned earlier that ASEAN is very attractive to the outside world because it's a big and huge market. But one thing that is probably going under the radar is that there is also market for Muslim-related product. I'll touch upon this later on. So, from this type of certain types of roles that many Indonesian religious-based organizations have been playing, I think there are 5 points that we can, or 4 points that we can keep in mind, because this is something that is growing and evolving, and then of course we need to pay a close attention. Number one, from the perspective of Indonesia, being a moderate Muslim country, or that at least what we are aspiring to be since 1945, that we need to have a moderate society surrounding Indonesia, because we are now living in the age of extreme, so to speak, because before the COVID-19, we see populist leaders using religion, ethnic, not only in Indonesia but across across the globe, that they are invoking religious sentiment to mobilize their supporters in various countries across the globe. So for the interest of Indonesia and also for the interest of the region, I think we need to keep trying to create a moderate society in Southeast Asia, regardless of the religion, regardless of the ethnicity and so on. But the point is that we need to have that kind of a society that is always to find a middle ground in conflicts that we are facing, for example. So then number two, and Nahdlatul Ulama has been playing a deep and long role in this, is that then we need to strengthen moderation and tolerance at the national level, because conflicts teach us that it's not everybody's interest to have conflicts. We suffer from religious conflict, for example, in the Maluku in late 1990s, in the beginning of our reform era, and then now we see in the Rakhine State, and we've seen that in the Philippines, who suffered the most is the people. Now, when we are talking about ASEAN as a community-centered, society-centered, then we need to strengthen our society, and moderation and tolerance, I think, is the way. Number three, I think for Indonesia, being the G20 country, we are number 20 in terms of the economic size in the world. I think we should play a more active role. Ambassador Ong mentioned that Indonesia is a kind of a middle power, and the strength of the state of a country is measured by their ability to help their neighbors. You know, if Indonesia now, if we are now able to help countries surrounding, in Southeast Asia or in smaller countries, essentially, then we can, think of ourselves of middle country, middle power. Now Indonesia is setting up what we call Indonesia Aid. So through that channel, the government set aside some funds for Indonesia to help smaller country, especially in the Pacific areas, and probably in various countries in Southeast Asia, where we can help. Number 4, then because our region is now very open due to the technology, no longer, relatively the barrier has gone down to interact. People can interact with one another from different countries and so on. So I think this is something that NU, Nahdlatul Ulama, needs to invest as well. That is enhancing our language skills of the moderate ulama, so they can also spread the kind of Nahdlatul Ulama's moderate teaching across Southeast Asia. So those 4, I think, consequences of the type of role that these Muslim organizations have been playing recently in the region. Now, lastly, from the consumer perspective, and this is big, I think it can also be very impactful to the economy of Southeast Asia and Indonesia in particular. The market, the demand for market that is more friendly to Islamic teaching is growing, even in the online platform. I gathered, for example, from the 5 largest e-commerce platform in Indonesia, Tokopedia, Shopee, Bukalapak, Lazada, and Blibli. In terms of their platform that has Sharia features, for example, for Muslim fashion, cosmetics, health insurance, and so on and so forth. It's been increasing very significantly. And for Indonesia, I think, because of people are more now aspiring, which is something that is, I think, in my opinion, is okay, to pay zakat online, to pay infak, wakaf, online, and so on. These platforms actually provide that kind of services. That means increasing as well the transaction online. So what I'm saying is that there are, for Indonesian Muslim society, there are also economic opportunities, because one critic that have been put forward to Indonesia's diplomacy and foreign policy is that sometimes we play kind of a peace activist role, that we want to make other countries happy with what Indonesia is doing, promoting peace, being neutral, and being the bridge of conflicts and so on, while at the same time we rarely see the economic benefit of that kind of a peace activism in foreign policy. Now, I think when it comes to the role of the Muslims organization, that I think goes along the line of with the government as well. That the thing that I've been mentioned earlier is kind of a peace activism as well. But there are also, I think, the economic side of it that we can expand and we can enrich ourselves with the main point that I've been mentioning earlier, that this should be done in the frame of creating a neutral, moderate society across Southeast Asia. Pak Coki, I think I should stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Philips. Okay, just wrap up what you have already presented, Pak, in bahasa Indonesia. Jadi tadi Pak Philips menyampaikan bahwa peranan dari Indonesia dalam hal ini sebagai pasar terbesar di ASEAN, sebagaimana disebutkan oleh Ambassador Ong, dan juga sebagai negara middle power, negara dengan kekuatan menengah, yang juga diharapkan bisa memiliki kemampuan untuk membantu negara-negara tetangganya. Ya, dan kawasan Asia Tenggara merupakan kawasan yang sangat terbuka terhadap teknologi, dan di sini beliau fokus kepada peran komunitas, peran warga masyarakat. Jadi tidak hanya G2G, pemerintah antar pemerintah di ASEAN, tapi juga semakin meningkatnya hubungan antara kelompok-kelompok masyarakat, antara individu di ASEAN. Dalam hal ini beliau juga menyampaikan peran yang bisa dimainkan oleh Nahdlatul Ulama sebagai organisasi massa Islam terbesar di Indonesia, yang diharapkan bisa juga memainkan peran sebagai mediator, misalnya mediating peace. Kemudian juga di sini juga beliau menyebutkan bahwa Nahdlatul Ulama, bahwa di sini juga Nahdlatul Ulama juga bisa berperan karena jumlah Muslim, populasi Muslim di negara ASEAN itu sekitar 42%. Jadi mungkin bisa berperan juga dalam mempromosikan produk-produk halal atau produk-produk Islam yang sesuai dengan syariah. Jadi itu yang disampaikan oleh beliau, dan di sini beliau menyoroti mengenai peranan Nahdlatul Ulama dalam civil society, kemudian juga di antara warga negara, dan juga dalam hubungannya dengan consumer. Baik, sebelum kami buka sesi tanya jawab, kami hendak menyambut dulu Pak Ketua, Pak Mundi Harno. Assalamualaikum, selamat bergabung. Ambassador Ong, Pak Philips, let me introduce you to our chairman, the chairman of the Nahdlatul Ulama Scholars Association Jakarta Chapter, Dr. Mundi Harno. Pak Mundi, are you there? Bapak, halo? Oke, mungkin
di mute ini, Pak.
Halo, oke, baik. Kalau begitu kami buka saja sesi tanya jawab. Mungkin 3 peserta dulu yang ingin bertanya, silakan. Kalau ingin bertanya langsung atau melalui chat.
Saya boleh pakai.
Oke, Pak Uswadin, mau bertanya?
Ya, Pak Suci.
Oke, siapa lagi? Oke, silakan Pak Uswadin. Bisa bahasa Indonesia, bisa bahasa Inggris, nanti kami bantu.
Baik, terima kasih. Bahasa Indonesia nanti bisa diklasikan. Agak
dimatikan dulu Pak, double tuh Pak.
Ya.
Ya, sebutkan ke siapa pertanyaannya Pak.
Ya, baik. Pertanyaannya pertama, terima kasih kepada Ambassador Ong Keng Yong yang telah menjelaskan dengan detail dan juga banyak memberikan pencerahan pada kami. Thank you very much for your presentation. Ada 3 hal yang ingin saya tanyakan tentang ASEAN ini. Memang kita sudah mengetahui bahwa ASEAN berdiri 8 Agustus 67, sudah 53 tahun. Kontribusi terbesar apa ASEAN terhadap kemajuan wilayah di ASEAN itu? Ya, kontribusi terbesar apa dari organisasi ASEAN ini terhadap wilayah-wilayah ASEAN ini? Kemudian yang kedua, bagaimana pandangan negara-negara atau organisasi regional di tempat lain seperti Masyarakat Ekonomi Eropa, OAU, Liga Arab, ASEAN? Apakah ASEAN itu menjadi satu organisasi yang diperhitungkan oleh organisasi regional ataupun mungkin organisasi di United Nations. Kemudian yang ketiga, kontribusi ASEAN terhadap dunia ini nyata ini apa? Karena memang kan kalau ASEAN ini kerjasamanya lebih kepada politik, ekonomi, sosial dan budaya, tidak kepada hal-hal yang bersifat dengan pertahanan ataupun yang artinya tidak di mata awam seperti saya sebagai guru di junior high sekolah. Itu aja Pak Coki, 3 pertanyaan yang
Ya, tadi pertanyaan pertama kemajuan wilayah ya Pak ya?
Ya, iya, terhadap kontribusi
Maksudnya
wilayah.
pembangunan wilayah gitu, regional development.
Ya.
Oke. Yang ketiga tadi suaranya agak pelan Pak, apa? Ketiga mengenai?
Sekarang kalau yang ketiga itu kontribusi ASEAN terhadap dunia itu apa Pak?
Oke, baik kalau begitu. Baik. Oke.
Ya.
Ke Ambasador Ong ya, pertanyaannya semuanya, atau ada ke Pak ini Philips, Pak Swadin?
Ya, mungkin ke Ambasador Ong, barangkali mungkin Pak Philip juga bisa melengkapi.
Oke, 2 penyanyi lain mungkin, silakan.
Baik Pak Coki.
Oke, silakan Pak Fahrul.
Terima kasih. Mungkin saya juga dalam bahasa Indonesia. Jadi baik untuk Ambasador Ong maupun Pak Philips ya, kita tahu bahwa ASEAN mungkin sudah sangat berumur sekali ya kalau dibanding kita analogikan kepada usia perkembangan manusia tahun 50 sudah berumur dalam waktu dekat ini 53 tahun ya. Kita tahu bahwa kalau saya tidak salah itu di 2015 itu sempat kemudian muncul peta jalan masa depan ASEAN yang ingin mewujudkan visi masyarakat ASEAN 2025. Nah tentu tantangan-tantangan apa yang saat ini paling krusial yang dihadapi untuk mencapai visi yang sangat-sangat baik digambarkan pada visi masyarakat ASEAN 2025. Saya hanya kurang menangkap bahwa di dalam visi tersebut itu tidak secara eksplisit upaya-upaya untuk melakukan misalnya bidang pendidikan gitu di kawasan-kawasan ASEAN ini. Seperti misalnya analogi kita kalau masyarakat ekonomi Eropa itu dia punya misalnya OECD ya yang di dalam standar-standar di bidang pendidikan yang saat ini juga termasuk menjadi salah satu yang dirujuk oleh Indonesia sebagai suatu benchmark gitu. Kemudian yang kaitan dengan Pak Philips tadi itu kaitan misalnya ketika disampaikan harapan-harapan untuk bisa NU sebagai bagian dari civil society itu punya peran untuk tadi selain yang digambarkan, memang yang paling terasa sekali itu adalah upaya-upaya NU dan termasuk juga misalnya Muhammadiyah itu untuk menjaga satu kerukunan umat beragama, termasuk upaya-upaya deradikalisasi. Tapi tadi ada menarik yang disampaikan oleh Pak Philips bahwa dimungkinkan untuk ada satu kerjasama lintas regional atau lintas negara, kawasan-kawasan negara-negara di ASEAN itu untuk membentuk sebuah komunitas. Nah, ini apakah memang peran yang bisa dilakukan secara informal atau kemudian bisa terwadai di dalam konteks untuk ASEAN. Ini saya ambil contoh misalnya untuk saat ini katakanlah untuk bidang keagamaan misalnya ya, kita tahu dalam menentukan awal bulan Hijriah misalnya ada kesertaan negara-negara Brunei, kemudian Malaysia, Singapura dalam konteks MABIMS ya untuk penentuan misalnya 1 Syawal, 1 Ramadan, 1 Zulhijjah gitu. Nah, apakah hal yang sama kemudian bisa juga diperluas untuk hal-hal lain? Karena misalnya saya baca dulu pernah ada keinginan untuk menyamakan satu harga ya di kawasan ASEAN. Sepertinya belum tercapai juga. Kemudian juga pernah ada gagasan untuk penyamaan zona waktu GMT plus 0.8 itu. itu juga sepertinya belum bisa dilakukan. Nah, untuk mungkin apakah kemudian seperti kasus Mabims tadi itu bisa kemudian terwadahi secara formal sebagai bagian dari program ASEAN. Sementara itu Pak Coki, terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Fahrudin. Sebenarnya ada satu lagi pertanyaan melalui chat, namun nampaknya ini pertanyaan ini lebih pas disampaikan kepada internal NU ini. Baik, kami persilakan kalau ada pertanyaan yang ingin disampaikan lagi ketiga. Oke, Pak. Oke, Ambassador Ong and Pak Philips. Dr. Uswadin, one of the participants, is asking about the contribution of ASEAN to the regional development in Southeast Asia and also in the Asia and Pacific region, and also and the second question of Dr. Uswadin is what are the views of other regional organizations in the world, such as European Union and others, and in other continents, to the contribution of ASEAN to the world. And the third question is what are the contributions of ASEAN to the peace and stability of the world, in the world. And another participant, Dr. Fahrudin, is asking about is mentioning about the roadmap of ASEAN, which has been formulated and agreed upon in 2015. And in this reconnection, he is asking about what kind of challenges that might hamper the realization of this roadmap, and whether this roadmap also includes the vision of enhancing cooperation on education sector in ASEAN. He would like to know. And Dr. Fahrudin also would like to know whether in the religious sector, he mentioned about the cooperation that has already been ongoing between Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, and Indonesia and Singapore in the framework of the Mabims in determining the day of Hari Raya, either Hari Raya Puasa or Hari Raya Haji. And he would like to know whether these Mabims are in meetings are in the context of ASEAN or is in outside ASEAN. And he's curious about the progress of the ASEAN, discussing the possibility of determining one time zone in all 10 member countries of its member countries. And also he heard about the possibility of having one single ASEAN currency. So both Dr. Uswadin and Dr. Fahrudin would like Ambassador Ong and also Pak Philips to respond on these questions. Please, sir.
Thank you. Pak Philip, I will go first, yeah?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to say that in response to Uswadin, yes, I think his point about how other regional organizations in the world see ASEAN is important. Yeah, we are only 53 years old in ASEAN, and many other regional organizations in Africa, in South America, in Europe, have been going on for longer than ASEAN. So I think the most important thing is ASEAN will continue to learn from all these other regional organizations. We have been doing quite active work with the European Union, because the European Union see ASEAN as an organization that is very close to the agenda and work of the European Union. So if you look at the ASEAN cooperation with European Union, the European Commission based in Brussels, there are many programs under which European Union extend capacity building, extend funding to help our ASEAN member states as a regional grouping, from one European grouping to one Southeast Asian grouping. In terms of the actual contribution to peace and security, ASEAN is not a military-based or defense-oriented organization. But what we try to do is to continue to engage all kind of parties or countries to some military and some security problem. So in the 1980s up to the 1990s, ASEAN played a very big role in helping to bring peace to Cambodia. Yeah, in this respect, Indonesia's active role and diplomacy during the 80s and 90s, 1980s and the 1990s, under Pak Ali Alatas, the late Pak Ali Alatas, and all the other leaders in Indonesia, contributed very, very significantly to the resolution of the Vietnamese intervention, military intervention in Cambodia. So in that respect, it has been a high point for ASEAN peace and reconciliation cooperation across the region. And I think European Union, the other regional organizations see that as the best example of how ASEAN has contributed to regional peace and security in Southeast Asia. In recent years, we have not been very effective in trying to maintain the peace and stability situation in Myanmar, especially with regard to the large number of refugees coming out from the Rakhine state in Myanmar. But at least what we are doing now is to engage all the parties, try our best to see how ASEAN can continue to contribute in one way or another to maintain the peaceful situation. We try not to allow this problem of the refugees coming out from Rakhine state in Myanmar to become escalated to a very big level. Concerning the question from Pak Fakhruddin, the roadmap to ASEAN community is hampered by three things. We have three obstacles for realizing the ASEAN community. The first is that not everybody in ASEAN population across all the 10 countries know what ASEAN governments are doing. Yeah. So unless you are going to fly from, say, Thailand to Indonesia, or from Indonesia to Philippines, you don't know the work done by the ASEAN government to make tourism or travel easy across the region. So now, ASEAN citizens can travel for tourism without the need for a visa across all the ASEAN countries. But not enough knowledge is out there for people to make use of this. Number two, we have also started to organize cooperation to deal with the current COVID-19 situation, this coronavirus pandemic. Again, many of the cooperation that we have among ASEAN countries in our region is not well known to our ASEAN population. So the challenge here is that we must make more information available to all our ASEAN people. The second big challenge is that the ASEAN community plan, the agenda, is now disturbed by the big crisis that we have on the global stage. Yeah, we have all the economic stoppage, yeah, and the work that is ongoing has been stopped because of our member countries dealing with the COVID-19 situation. So we need to reactivate this and make the ASEAN community building plan more and more streamlined, more and more urgent, and tried our best to keep in the plan that we have developed. And the third thing is that internationally, the relationship between the big countries, USA and China, for example, they are not in good situation. They are not positive. So this affects our ASEAN agenda, our ASEAN cooperation across all the Southeast Asian countries. So we now need to look at how we can overcome some of these challenges. There is no plan with regard to one currency. ASEAN country, we have decided that we will not do like what the European Union has done. There is no single currency because at the moment, our respective economies are still very dependent on national program, and so it is not really try to make a single currency for ASEAN countries. Number two, one time zone. Yes, this program has been discussed across all the ASEAN countries. I think they are still talking about it, but at the moment, due to the coronavirus pandemic, the issue has been postponed for future discussion. In terms of religious cooperation, religious discussion across ASEAN, there have been cooperation among the 5 countries that Fahrul talked about, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei. Time to time, we also have people from Thailand participating in the discussion. So we have seen cooperation among the Muslim authorities of these 5 ASEAN countries, hoping to systematically do something uniform across the Muslim society in Southeast Asia. I think more will be developed in the coming years. Of course, this is a good news for us because I think if we have more common understanding about the date for the Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha will be a very good one. And also in the presentation by Philip Vermont, he talks about the prospects of halal products, halal food. Yeah, I think this is a very important economic angle. Yeah, going forward, as we say, 42% of our ASEAN population comprise Muslims. So if we can develop common understanding with regard to halal food production, halal products going across our Southeast Asia, it will be very good for us. So thank you, Pak Choki.
Oke, Pak. Thank you. Pak Philip, silakan.
Terima kasih, Pak Coki. Ada 2 pertanyaan ya, maksudnya dari Pak Uswadin dan dari Pak Fahrudin, yang Pak Uswadin sudah dijawab lengkap oleh Pak Ong Keng Yong. Mungkin saya hanya menambahkan sedikit karena pertanyaannya bukan untuk saya. Dalam hal pembangunan, saya kira banyak yang terjadi di Asia Tenggara, mungkin levelnya di sub-region. Jadi misalnya ada Great Mekong River Cooperation. Itu kerjasama antara negara-negara di ASEAN yang di daratan. Mereka membangun infrastruktur, pertanian, dan macam-macam di sana yang sifatnya sub-region. Dalam konteks kita juga ada banyak sub-region yang Indonesia terlibat. Misalnya di MEAGA, ya kan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, dan lain-lain itu berusaha membangun infrastruktur ekonomi untuk meningkatkan perdagangan dan exchange lintas barang dan manusia juga gitu. So in terms of development, there are many things that have been going on in ASEAN. juga ada ASEAN punya ASEAN Connectivity program itu yang mencakup banyak hal, mulai dari infrastruktur fisik dan lain-lain. Jadi memang masalahnya adalah ASEAN membutuhkan, we need our dialogue partners cooperation to fund the projects gitu. Karena dari ASEAN sendiri mungkin allocation of funds-nya masih terbatas gitu. Nah, kemudian dari Pak Fahrudin, saya kira dalam hal ini adalah konteksnya yang saya sampaikan nanti adalah people to people relations. Itu untuk melengkapi dan memperkuat government to government relation yang tadi disebut Pak Coki juga gitu. Jadi tadi juga sudah dicontohkan oleh Pak Ong Keng Yong terkait dengan religious relations gitu ya. Tetapi mungkin dalam konteks kita hari ini untuk menjaga the relevance of ASEAN, sebetulnya what are the challenges that we are facing right now? Menurut saya kita jauh lebih rumit because kita facing tetap ada traditional challenges, traditional security challenges, misalnya South China Sea. Di situ geopolitical rivalry gitu. Tapi di sisi yang lain semakin banyak challenges yang sifatnya non traditional, ya kan? Pandemi, natural disasters, climate change dan lain-lain. Dan ini untuk to make ASEAN relevance, ASEAN has to start tackling this problem more seriously. Dan itu that requires multi stakeholders approach, not only government, but for example, strengthening university networks among scientists in Southeast Asia. University network sudah ada, ASEAN punya, tetapi mungkin itu needs to be deepened, needs to be taken more seriously. Labs, collaboration, laboratorium, gitu kan, ahli public health, we have to sit together, gitu. Para scientists, think tanks, academics, mass organization semacam Nahdlatul Ulama, because we are facing my term is technocratic problems, right? Climate change is technocratic problem. Pandemic is a technocratic problem. You cannot only talk this out in the conference room, among foreign ministers, but it requires insights from our top scientists across Southeast Asia to deal with this together. But at the same time, we need mass organization as well for disaster reliefs, for volunteers, dan lain-lain gitu. Jadi tantangan kita adalah bagaimana meningkatkan P2P relations. Dan kalau boleh ambil examples yang lain, misalnya di EU, European Union, mereka punya program Erasmus program. Jadi mahasiswa di across European country itu dia bisa kuliah dengan mudah di negara, di universitas yang ikut participation, lebih mudah. Ambil semester di sini, ambil semester di sana. So probably this is a good idea. Students from Myanmar can study one semester in Gajah Mada University, or Indonesian student can study in University of Philippines for one semester. So kind of exchanging views among our youth. Itu juga something that we can think about to expand the P2P relation. Jadi not only the religious relations, but to create this future technocrats of Southeast Asia, because the problem that we are facing, I think, is technocratic in nature. If ASEAN fail to do this now, then it might lose its relevance, 10 years down the road. That's my response.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Philips. Pak Ismaeni, Pak Fahrudin, bagaimana? Cukup menjawab?
Cukup Pak,
cukup Pak, terima kasih.
Hanya menambahkan saja, mungkin Bapak-Bapak belum mengetahui bahwa di bidang kerjasama, forum kerjasama ASEAN di bidang pendidikan itu adalah ASOT dan AMET. Jadi ASEAN Senior Officials on Education dan ASEAN Ministers of Education Forum. Jadi sudah ada forumnya. Jadi itu mereka para menteri-menteri pendidikan dan pejabat-pejabat Kemdikbud itu bertemu tiap tahun untuk membahas hal-hal yang bisa dikerjasamakan satu sama lain. Jadi itu menambahkan saja. Tadi sudah disinggung juga oleh Pak Philips mengenai kerjasama antar universitas di EU yang mungkin bisa dicontoh oleh universitas-universitas atau perguruan-perguruan tinggi di ASEAN. Misalnya dengan antara UNJ dengan universitas di Filipina atau di Malaysia atau di Thailand misalnya. Jadi bisa sitting atau tergantung nanti bagaimana kesepakatannya, apakah dual degree program atau apalah nanti. Ya, baik. Selanjutnya kami buka lagi kesempatan untuk 3 peserta untuk bertanya. Kami persilakan.
Saya Pak Coki.
Ya, silakan Bu Umasi, silakan Bu Dekan.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Coki. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Ya, saya mungkin satu hal saja yang saya tanyakan.
Maaf Bu, suaranya trembling Bu, nggak terlalu jelas Bu, mohon diulang.
Susi hangat di kawasan ASEAN, maaf
Ya.
di kampung yang internetnya wifi-nya
Oke,
kurang
nggak apa-apa.
bagus.
Pelan-pelan Bu ya. Oke.
Ya, masalah yang masih hangat hingga saat ini di kawasan Laut Cina Selatan itu kan konflik ya Pak ya, karena klaim Cina terhadap pulau-pulau yang memang memiliki sumber daya alam luar biasa di kawasan ASEAN. Negara-negara ASEAN seperti Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia itu memang agak panas gitu ya. Akan tetapi Indonesia nampaknya malah diam-diam dulu gitu ya. Nah, apakah itu menjadi bagian dari strategi politik luar negeri kita ya? Padahal kalau misalnya Indonesia juga punya Indonesia kan memiliki populasi yang luar biasa banyak. Kemudian juga menjadi salah satu negara terbesar di kawasan ASEAN. Andai mungkin kita solidaritas ASEAN itu dibangun untuk menghadapi atau membangun strategi ya menghadapi Cina di konflik Cina Selatan itu mungkin bisa barangkali ya Pak Coki seperti itu gitu ya. Jadi kenapa Indonesia sampai sekarang diam gitu? Itu pertanyaan saya. Terima kasih, itu saja. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Silakan peserta lainnya Bapak Ibu.
Irman Pak.
Ya, Pak Suwadi lagi. Siapa yang mau nanya? Pak Irman, silakan.
Terima kasih. Selamat pagi Pak Coki, teman-teman dari ISNU. Perkenalkan saya Irman Lanti, saya temannya Pak Coki, saya dari Ikatan Alumni HI Unpad. Kebetulan Pak Coki adalah teman sekelas saya dan saya diundang oleh beliau untuk hadir di sini. I would like to ask a question in English ya Pak Coki ya.
By all means Pak, silakan.
Okay, to Ambassador Ong and Pak Philips, my question is very short. It's what do you think is the most significant challenge facing ASEAN and the whole Southeast Asia in the short term, meaning within 2 or 3 years time, and in the midterm, up to 7 to probably 8 years down the line. On 2 aspects. First is the challenges facing us externally, and the second one is the challenges facing the ASEAN institution itself. I hope that's clear, Pak Coki.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Itu saja Pak. Baik. Oke, tadi Bu Umasi, Pak Irman, siapa lagi? Satu lagi? Pak Edo mau nanya? Siapa lagi? Baik, kalau gitu sebelum kami persilakan Ambassador Ong dan Pak. Oh, silakan Pak Edo.
Ya. Maaf, baru dengar, maaf. Pak Coki, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I'd like to ask directly to Ambassador Ong. This is regarding a security issues, security concern. In our ASEAN, ASEAN is famous for a middle way, or we are trying to mediate any conflict in a soft way, perhaps, probably because our culture, I don't know. Ambassador Ong, this is regarding about the coming superpower, People's Republic of China. How do we, I mean, how do we prepare ourselves of the coming power of superpower of People's Republic of China? Because we don't want to make any conflict with Chinese government, or especially in our recent times, Wuhan, and then perhaps Hong Kong national security law, and so on and so forth, and the national and the South China Sea dispute. Okay, thank you, Ambassador Ong. Thank you, Pak Coki.
Oke, thank you Pak Edo. Sebelum kami persilakan Ambassador Ong dan Pak Philips untuk menjawab, kami mohon Bapak-bapak, Ibu-ibu untuk mengisi absensi pada link Google Form yang tercantum di kolom chat. Jangan lupa, apalagi bagi mereka yang ingin mendapatkan sertifikat. Baik, ini pertanyaan Pak Edo sama dengan yang disampaikan, nggak beda jauh dengan yang disampaikan Bu Umasi terkait dengan China atau Tiongkok. Mungkin untuk meluruskan bahwa memang klaim China ini memang juga sama dengan klaim 4 negara ASEAN lainnya, tapi bukan berarti klaim terhadap perairan atau pulau di Laut Cina Selatan itu berasal dari seluruh negara anggota ASEAN. Hanya 4, yaitu Vietnam, Malaysia, Vietnam, Filipina, Brunei, kemudian Malaysia. Jadi memang ini juga klaim yang sebenarnya klaim dari masing-masing negara, bukan dari ASEAN secara organisasi, Bu. Jadi itu penjelasan dari kami. Kebetulan kami bertugas di Kementerian Luar Negeri tahu mengenai hal ini, tapi jawaban kami ini secara pribadi ya, bukan atas nama organisasi lembaga. Tapi Indonesia bersikap diam sebenarnya nggak juga, Bu. Kita udah mengajukan protes terhadap 9 dash line-nya yang diklaim oleh China, itu saja. Bahkan kita juga sudah menegaskan bahwa perairan di utara Natuna itu yang kita sebut Laut Natuna Utara yang menimbulkan protes juga dari pihak Tiongkok. Ini saya hanya kasih gambaran sebelum saya berikan floor kepada Ambassador Ong dan Pak Philips. Oke, Ambassador Ong and Pak Philips, the first question by Ibu Umasi is about the claim by China to the islands and also water territory in the South China Sea. She would like to know whether this has been responded accordingly by ASEAN, or what has actually been happening there, whether this is a claim by ASEAN as a whole, or just certain ASEAN member countries to this China's claim. And I think the other questions are posed in English, so I don't have to reiterate again. Okay, please, Pak Ong, Pak Philips, I give you the floor.
Thank you. Pak Philip, I will answer first, and then you maybe can give us your views also.
Yes.
Thank you. Concerning the tension in the South China Sea, yeah, I think this will carry on for a while, because I think at the moment, both the Chinese as well as all the other countries which are having territorial claims in the South China Sea, they are adopting a very strong stand for their respective position. So the important thing now is we must try to continue diplomacy. Right now, we are talking with the Chinese on a code of conduct. Because of the COVID-19 situation, our negotiation between ASEAN and China on the code of conduct has been delayed, has been suspended in view of the time and the inability to travel. But I know that the two sides, China and ASEAN, and inside ASEAN we have the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and of course Indonesia. In recent times, we also see some discussion with the Chinese with regard to their claim of the EEZ, exclusive economic zone in the South China Sea. The ASEAN countries have maintained a position that the code of conduct negotiation is always between ASEAN and China, not just only the ASEAN countries having specific territorial dispute in the South China Sea. So we see this continuing. Negotiation will continue. It may not be very fast, yeah, but I think the ASEAN stand is that while we continue talking, the Chinese side should not try to make other changes to the situation on the ground, because there is increased activity like fishing fleet from China and building of other facilities on some of the reefs and other features in the South China Sea. So I feel that this discussion will continue. Yeah, negotiation for the legal position must continue, but situation on the ground should not be changed by any unilateral action. The question which come from Mr. Edo, yeah, but Edo,
Yes.
yeah,
Pak Edo.
yeah, yes, this kind of security differences on security issues will continue to trouble ASEAN and China, or ASEAN with other big powers coming into our region. The only way now is to keep calm and try to engage each other in a constructive manner. Yeah, we cannot try to impose our opinion on anybody, whether it is ASEAN trying to tell people what we feel and we want to do it this way, or whether China want to do it this way, or America wants to do it this way. So the best thing to do is, as Pak Edo said, we continue our soft diplomatic approach. It is better to talk and find some solution than to try to scream and be tough against each other. That will not solve any problem. Yeah. As you say, Mr. Edo, Pak Edo, the ASEAN way is always in the middle. Yeah. And this is a very time-consuming approach, but it makes sense to the thinking people, because if you don't try to accommodate each other, the only way is to take strong action, which will lead to other conflict that will not be good for us. And in this connection, I want to say that, you know, Iman Lanty's question about the long-term challenges. In the short term, the challenge is for ASEAN to continue our cooperation on tackling the economic damage done by the coronavirus pandemic. The next 2 years or so, we are going to be facing a lot of challenges, because our ASEAN community plan is based on open connectivity. Right now, the COVID-19 has stopped all this connectivity. How are we going to survive? Yeah, tourism is a major part of our ASEAN cooperation action plan, and traveling around ASEAN countries have virtually stopped. So we need to tackle this. We must not allow any of our ASEAN economy to go under the water, so to speak. Yeah, it will take at least 2 to 3 years to find a way out of this kind of dilemma. But for the longer term, what you say in the next 7, 8 years, I believe it will be how to find a solution on the South China Sea competing claims, because what you have is China insisting that South China Sea, 80% of South China Sea belong to Chinese historical position. Yeah. And then we have ASEAN countries like Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, and now even Indonesia, saying that this is not possible. If you take 80%, then there's nothing left for me, right? So this is not a good way to conduct a good neighbor policy. So I think in the coming 5, 6, 7, 8 years, this idea of having a code of conduct should continue. We hope to get some agreement, and then we have to implement the code of conduct. What does it mean? It means we have to stop provoking each other in those areas that we have competing claims. Yeah. So this is my analysis. Thank you, Pak Choki.
Oke, thank you Ambassador Ong. Pak Philips, silakan.
Terima kasih Pak Choki. Tentang China dari Ibu Umasi dan Pak Edo. I think yang kita harus lakukan terus baik oleh Indonesia maupun ASEAN adalah terus-menerus socializing China with the norms and principles that have been there for ASEAN for a long time. Now that China becoming will soon to be a superpower, then China needs to also understand that there are certain rules and norms in Southeast Asia that other major powers before China agreed and play by the rule of the games in Southeast Asia. So then this is the task yang that we need to continue socializing China. It is tiring, you know, through dialogues, through meetings and persuasions and so on, so that norms and principles and best practices in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, then needs to be accepted by China. Other than that, the question of COC, DOC, and others have been explained by Ambassador Ong. On Pak Irman, short-term challenges, long-term challenges, I think I agree with Ambassador Ong that economic recovery certainly is our short-term and at the same time long-term a very big challenge for Indonesia and for ASEAN, and not only that for the whole countries that now we are all affected by this economic consequences of the COVID-19. So probably then we have to think about larger international cooperations involving other institutions as well. Maybe WTO needs to be adjusted as well to deal with this. And maybe ASEAN needs to be strengthened institutionally, because Pak Irman also asked about the institutional challenge of ASEAN. Maybe we need to expand the role and authority of the ASEAN Secretariat so it can respond quickly without the need to wait for the leaders to meet, gather, and make decisions. There are, I think, certain things that can actually be handed over to the ASEAN Secretariat to move forward. So that I think one of the things that we need to do in order for us to make ASEAN relevance, then we need to adjust the institution. I think that's my quick response.
Can I also invite Ambassador Ong to also respond about the institutional question, Ambassador Ong, since you are the former ASEAN Secretary General?
Please, Ambassador Ong.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Pak Yuan. I think the most important thing about ASEAN institution is that, number one, what we have, we must strengthen them. As Pak Philip Vermont said, we have to find a way to give more responsibility, more mandate to the ASEAN Secretariat. What I'm happy about is that in the last 10 years, we have been very careful in ASEAN. We don't carry on creating new institutions without giving it the substance, without giving it the capacity to make it effective. So we have now stopped creating new institutions. What we need to do now is to give substantive meat, substantive responsibility, substantive mandate to all the institutions that we have in ASEAN. One of the things that I try to persuade our ASEAN leaders to do during the time when I was Secretary General is that we have to make ASEAN institutions more visible in all our ASEAN member states. If you go to Laos or if you go to Myanmar or you even go to Manila, you ask people, what is ASEAN? They have very little general knowledge because the ASEAN institutions which we have in Jakarta, ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN Foundation and ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, the ASEAN Center for Energy, all these are very far away from our people in Manila or in Naypyidaw or in Vientiane. So we should try to create more presence, more programs in all these ASEAN cities to show off that ASEAN institutions are functioning and there are ASEAN organizations doing different kind of work. So that is important. I hope I answer your question, Pak Aman. Thank you.
Oke, thank you Ambassador. So karena waktu juga Bapak Ibu, mungkin sekedar untuk menambahkan saja bahwa Indonesia bukan claimant terhadap wilayah perairan China Selatan, Laut Cina Selatan, namun menegaskan kedaulatannya atas perairan di utara Natuna. Itu menegaskan kembali. Jadi negara-negara ASEAN yang menjadi claimant hanya 4, yaitu Malaysia, Filipina, Vietnam, dan Brunei. Kemudian yang kedua, saya tidak berusaha menyimpulkan, namun dari rangkuman yang disampaikan oleh Ambassador Ong dan Pak Philips tadi bahwa pengetahuan mengenai ASEAN itu hingga saat ini belum semua saudara-saudara kita di berbagai negara ASEAN, bahkan di Jakarta sendiri juga nggak banyak tahu mengenai ASEAN. Itu sebabnya perlu adanya pemberian tanggung jawab dan mandat yang lebih besar kepada Sekretariat ASEAN untuk menyelenggarakan program-program memperkenalkan mengenai ASEAN itu sendiri. Ini tanpa bermaksud menyalahkan atau tanpa maksud mengkritik, namun memang kenyataannya memang Sekretariat ASEAN belum secara optimal mensosialisasikan atau memfamiliarisasi mengenai ASEAN. Padahal kita ini merupakan salah satu negara besar pendiri ASEAN. Ya, jadi itu mungkin untuk closing statement. For closing statement, Ambassador Ong and Pak Philips, I'll give you the floor now, please, before we close this discussion.
You want me to start now?
Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Pak Joki. I thank you for this initiative, bringing us together to talk about these ASEAN issues this Saturday morning. I think from the question given to us, Philip and myself, the Indonesian colleagues are very interested in ASEAN issues. And I think this is to be expected because Indonesia is the biggest country in ASEAN. And as I try to say, it is the most significant economy in ASEAN. So let's hope that we can have more interest in ASEAN, and we will continue to try to answer whatever questions and doubts any one of our thinking ASEAN citizens have about our regional organization. We try to make ASEAN more recognizable to our ASEAN citizens, and there are many problems facing ASEAN, but we cannot expect all these problems to be solved immediately. So the important thing is that we keep the issue, the challenges in our radar scope, find way to handle them or to solve them. If we cannot solve them, we must not allow the problem to become bigger. Yeah, if we become bigger, then it's even more difficult to solve. So, at least that's my what I call first approach. Whatever problem we have in ASEAN and between ASEAN and other countries, we mustn't allow it to become bigger problems. And then we try to slowly find a way to resolve some of these differences. Terima kasih, Pak Choki.
Terima kasih. Pak Philip, silakan.
Yeah, very short. I think thank you again for this initiative. I agree with Ambassador Ong that we need more of this kind of discussion organized not only by think tanks, academics. They are the usual suspects. They have a lot of discussions on ASEAN, on security, strategic issues. But I think if organization like Nahdlatul Ulama and other mass-based organization in Indonesia discussing ASEAN, that will help us to building more blocks for more ASEAN cooperation, especially from the P2P, people-to-people relations point of view. Thank you, Pak Choki.
Okay, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak-bapak, Ibu, para peserta, mari kita berikan big of applause to our speakers. Baik, sebelum diskusi ini benar-benar kami akhiri, mungkin ada sepatah kata dari Pak Mundi Harno, Ketua ISDU DKI, sebelum ditutup. Silakan Pak Mundi. Halo Pak Mundi. Oke, baik kalau gitu, Ambassador Ong, Pak Philips, on behalf of the organizer of this discussion, I would like to express our sincere thanks and highest appreciation to both of you. It is an honor and a great pleasure to have you both as our distinguished speakers at our discussion this morning. It has been a productive and a pleasant discussion that we have had, and hope that we can get in touch in the future. Hopefully, if COVID is already gone away, we can meet in Jakarta, Pak Ambassador Ong and Pak Philips, of course, and we have another session in some place in Jakarta later on. So, Bapak Ibu, terima kasih banyak atas kehadirannya, dan jangan lupa mengisi link absensi sebelum leave virtual discussion ini. Sekali lagi kami sangat menghargai partisipasi Bapak Ibu sekalian. Baik, walahul walahul muwafiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu.
Jumpa lagi.
Oke, Ambassador Ong, Pak Philips, Bapak Ibu, Pak Irman, Pak Farudin, Pak Uswadin.
Terima kasih. Sangat
Jumpa lagi.
Gus Fasih.
Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih. Keep in touch, please.
Ambassador.
Yes.
Pak Choki.
Yes, Bu, Pak.
Pak Ambassador udah pamit ya. Itu RSIJ itu apa?
Yang mana?
RSIS itu semacam CSIS atau sekolah di bawah NTU.
Yang mana? Yang RSIS itu adalah organisasi think tank di NTU, Pak.
Oh, gitu ya.
Ya, beda dengan CSIS. CSIS kita kan independen, berdiri sendiri. Nah, kalau RSIS itu dia think tank di bawah NTU yang khusus memang untuk penelitian dan research sekaligus ini. Ya, saya mohon juga ingin menyampaikan juga ke Pak Nur Asasi. Sorry pertanyaannya tadi nggak sempat dijawab Pak Nur, karena pertanyaannya lebih pas kalau menurut kami ditujukan kepada internal NU gitu ya. Mengenai jumlah PCE NU itu sekitar 54 atau 55 kata pengetahuan saya di luar negeri. Kalau di ASEAN PCE NU saya kurang tahu ya, tapi yang jelas di Malaysia ada, di Singapura belum ada. Jadi itu untuk menjawab pertanyaan Pak Nur Asasi. Nah, pertanyaan berikutnya mengenai how Singapore respond or anticipate economic crisis, karena sifatnya lebih ke Singapura, Pak Nur. Jadi bukan ASEAN. sepertinya kurang pas disampaikan ke Ambasador Ong walaupun beliau pejabat Kementerian Luar Negeri Singapura. Karena konteksnya memang diskusi ini mengenai ASEAN begitu. Dan beliau juga pendalamannya mengenai ASEAN. Itu saja Pak. Tapi mengenai ini saya rasa mungkin saya bisa sampaikan bahwa karena saya pernah bertugas di Singapura, biasanya mereka langsung cepat bertindak Pak. Mereka ada yang namanya Monetary Authority of Singapore. Mereka langsung bertindak sebagai otoritas moneter, langsung bertindak untuk mengamankan mata uang dolar Singapura ini supaya tidak volatile begitu, Pak. Jadi makanya sekarang relatif stabil kan walaupun sempat melemah gitu mata uang dolar Singapura. Saya rasa ekonominya memang terpengaruh besar Pak, resesi mereka sekarang ini Pak. Resesi. Jadi malah lebih baik kita daripada Singapura. Pertumbuhannya. Mereka kalau nggak salah kalau kita kan sekitar berapa? 4,5 ya, Pak Fahrul, saya lupa berapa Pak. Apa Pak Ismaeni? 4, tapi masih lebih baik lah daripada Singapura pertumbuhannya hingga akhir Juli 2020 ini. Itu. Jadi itu jadi memang mereka lebih terdampak karena mereka bukan produsen sumber daya alam gitu. Kalau kita kan kuat karena sumber daya alam kita kan melimpah, alhamdulillah. Mereka kan nggak punya sumber daya alam dan sumber daya manusia mereka juga orang asing gitu, pekerja asing. Ya alhamdulillah lah di saat-saat seperti ini kita lebih kuat fundamental ekonominya begitu. Ya. Baik Bapak Ibu, Pak Farudin, Pak Ismaeni, Bu Masih, Pak Nur, Pak Edo, Pak Bambang, waduh lagi nyupir. Hati-hati Pak Bambang.
Waalaikumsalam.
Bu Nanda dan yang lain-lain, kami pamit dulu. Saya akhiri, saya sudahi dulu diskusi ini. Sampai ketemu nanti kita komunikasi lagi lewat WhatsApp grup ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu, izin live.